The day they announced first contact with an alien species, Dr. James Rivera thought his life couldn't get any stranger. He was wrong. Dead wrong. James worked at the Global Space Research Center as a xenobiologist. For 15 years, he'd been studying the possibility of alien life, analyzing rock samples from distant planets, running simulations, writing papers that maybe 3 people in the world actually read. It was quiet work. Predictable work. The kind of work where the biggest excitement was finding a new protein structure in a Martian soil sample. Then everything changed overnight. The ship appeared above Earth without warning. Not threatening, not aggressive, just there, floating silently above the Pacific Ocean like it had always belonged there. Within hours, they made contact. They wanted to talk. They wanted to learn about us, and they wanted us to learn about them. The whole world held its breath. Her name was Zara. At least that's the closest translation we could manage. She was the first of her kind to step foot on Earth, and somehow, James got assigned as her cultural guide. Him. Out of everyone at the facility, they picked the guy who spent most of his time talking to microscopes. The first time he saw her, James forgot how to breathe for a solid 10 seconds. She looked almost human, but not quite. Her skin had this shimmer to it like light dancing on water. It changed colors ever so slightly depending on how she felt. Calm blue when she was relaxed, soft purple when she was curious, warm amber when she laughed. Her eyes were larger than human eyes, more expressive somehow, like they could see right through you into places you didn't even know existed. She wore flowing clothes that seemed to move on their own, fabrics that didn't exist on Earth. But there was one thing she always wore, no matter what, a long skirt-like garment that reached down to her ankles. It was beautiful, woven with patterns that seemed to shift and change when you looked at them directly. Those first few weeks were awkward, as you'd imagine. James would show her around the facility, explaining things that seemed simple to him but fascinated her endlessly. She'd never seen rain before. Can you imagine that? She stood outside for an hour the first time it rained, just letting the drops fall on her face, laughing like a child. Her skin turned bright gold with joy. On my world, she told him, water comes from beneath the ground, not from the sky. This is magic. James found himself smiling more than he had in years. There was something about Zara that made everything feel new again. She asked questions about everything. Why did humans shake hands? What made music beautiful? Why did people cry when they were happy? Questions he'd never thought to ask himself. One evening, about a month into her stay, they sat together in the observation lounge. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that made even Zara's shifting skin look ordinary by comparison. She was quiet that day, her skin a deep, thoughtful indigo. James, she said softly, I need to tell you something important about my people. He turned to face her, curious. She'd shared bits and pieces about her world before, but always carefully, like she was translating something that couldn't quite be put into human words. We have customs, she continued, her voice gentle but serious. Sacred things that must never be broken. They're not just rules, they're part of who we are, part of what makes us connected to our home, to our people, to everything we've ever known. James nodded, listening carefully. Every culture has things like that. We have them too. Yes, but this is different. Her skin flickered between colors, uncertain, worried. The garments we wear on our lower body, they're not just clothes. They protect something precious. Something that connects each of us to every other member of our species across the entire universe. It's our link to home, to our families, to our very identity. She looked at him directly then, her large eyes searching his face. James, I'm telling you this because I trust you, because you've been kind to me and I consider you a friend. Please, I need you to promise me something. Promise me that you'll never try to look beneath my garment, never try to see what's underneath. It would destroy something that can never be rebuilt. The intensity in her voice caught him off guard. This wasn't just modesty or embarrassment. This was something deeper, something almost desperate. I promise, James said without hesitation. I respect your culture, Zara. I would never do anything to hurt you or violate your trust. Her skin shifted to a warm, relieved pink. She reached out and touched his hand briefly, a gesture she'd learned from humans. Thank you. You don't know what that means to me. They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the stars come out one by one. James felt good about his promise. It seemed like such a simple thing, respecting someone's boundaries. He couldn't imagine why anyone would even want to break such a promise. The weeks turned into months. James and Zara fell into an easy routine. Every morning he'd bring her coffee, which she'd discovered she loved despite it not existing on her world. Every evening, they'd walk through the facility gardens talking about everything and nothing. She told him about the crystal forests of her home planet, where trees grew from pure light and sang in harmonies that could make you weep. He told her about his childhood, about learning to love science, about the day he first looked through a telescope and realized how small and how vast everything was at the same time. Other scientists wanted time with Zara too, of course. They ran non-invasive tests, scanned her from a distance, asked endless questions about her biology and her world. She was patient with all of it, answering what she could, politely declining when questions went too far. Everyone respected her boundaries, everyone except the people at the top. James started noticing changes about 4 months into Zara's stay. His supervisor, Director Chen, began sitting in on their sessions. Other officials, people James had never seen before, started showing up at the facility. Men in suits who didn't smile, who watched Zara like she was a puzzle to be solved rather than a person to be understood. One day, Director Chen called James into his office. The man sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, face unreadable. "James, we need to talk about the alien. Her name is Zara," James corrected automatically. "Yes, Zara." Director Chen's expression didn't change. "We've learned a great deal from her, but there are still significant gaps in our understanding. Biological gaps, medical gaps, things that could be crucial for future diplomatic relations, for understanding her species fully." James felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What are you asking?" "We need a complete examination. Full medical scans, comprehensive biological data. We need to understand every aspect of her physiology." "We've done scans," James said carefully. "Non-invasive ones. She's cooperated with everything we've asked." "Not everything." Director Chen leaned forward. "There are areas she's refused to allow us to examine. We need that data, James, all of it." "No." The word came out harder than James intended. "She's explained why those areas are off limits. It's cultural, religious maybe. We can't just violate that. We can and we will." Director Chen's voice was steel. "This is bigger than cultural sensitivity, Dr. Rivera. This is about the security of our planet, about understanding a species that could be friend or foe. We need to know everything." James stood up, his hands shaking. "I won't be part of this." "Then you'll be removed from the project." Director Chen stood as well, his expression hard. "And someone else will do it. Someone who might not be as gentle. Someone who might not care about her comfort at all. Is that what you want?" The trap closed around James like a vice. If he refused, they'd do it anyway, possibly in a way that would be even worse for Zara. If he agreed, at least he could try to minimize her distress, try to make it as quick and painless as possible. "Think about it," Director Chen said, sitting back down. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide. But this is happening with or without you." That night, James couldn't sleep. He paced his apartment, his mind racing through options that all led nowhere. He could warn Zara, but where would she go? The ship that brought her was gone, she was alone here. He could refuse and let someone else do it, but the guilt of that felt impossibly heavy. He could go through with it himself, at least knowing he'd try to make it as bearable as possible. Every option felt like betrayal. When morning came, James walked into Director Chen's office with lead in his shoes and shame in his heart. He agreed to help with the examination. He told himself he was doing it to protect her. He told himself it was the lesser evil. He told himself a lot of things that didn't make the decision any easier to live with. They scheduled it for the next day in the medical bay, with armed security standing by. Just in case, they said. James felt sick. The medical bay felt colder than usual that morning. James arrived early, hoping to find some courage in the sterile white walls and humming equipment. He found none. Just the steady beep of monitors and the weight of what he was about to do pressing down on his chest like a physical thing. Zara arrived escorted by 2 guards, which itself felt wrong. She'd been walking freely around the facility for months, and now suddenly, she needed an armed escort? She saw James and her skin flickered between colors rapidly, uncertain, confused. "James? What's happening? They said you requested my presence for an important examination." The lie burned in his throat. He hadn't requested anything. This was all Director Chen's doing, but they'd used his name, used their friendship as bait to get her here without resistance. Another layer of betrayal he'd have to carry. Zara, He couldn't finish the sentence. How do you tell someone you're about to break the most important promise you ever made to them? Director Chen entered with 3 other officials and 2 medical technicians. The room suddenly felt crowded, oppressive. Zara's skin went pale, almost white, an alarm color James had never seen before. What is this? Her voice was small, frightened. Miss Zara. Director Chen's voice was professional, detached, like he was discussing equipment rather than a living being. We need to conduct a comprehensive medical examination. It's a standard procedure for diplomatic relations. Nothing to be concerned about. I've already done examinations, Zara said, backing toward the wall. I've cooperated with every test, every scan you've asked for. Not every test. Director Chen nodded to the technicians. We need complete data. All of it. Zara's eyes found James's across the room. In that look he saw understanding dawn, saw the exact moment she realized what was about to happen. Her skin went through a cascade of colors, shock, betrayal, fear, settling finally on a deep, dark purple that looked almost like bruising. James, she whispered. You promised. Those 3 words hit him harder than any punch could have. He wanted to run. He wanted to grab her hand and get her out of there. He wanted to be anywhere but in that room, watching her world collapse around her. I'm sorry, he managed to say. The words felt pathetically inadequate. Please, Zara said, her voice shaking now. Please don't do this. I've explained why this is sacred to my people. James, you said you understood. You promised me. The examination will proceed, Director Chen said flatly. You can cooperate or we can use restraints. The choice is yours. Tears formed in Zara's eyes. Actual tears, something James hadn't known her species could do. They rolled down her cheeks like liquid starlight catching the harsh medical bay lights. I'll cooperate, she said quietly, defeated. But please, let me speak to James alone for just 1 moment. Director Chen looked annoyed but nodded. 1 minute. Make it quick. The others stepped back, though the guards remained by the door. Zara walked slowly toward James, each step seeming to take enormous effort. When she stood in front of him, close enough that he could see the colors shifting under her skin like storms beneath water, she spoke so softly only he could hear. I thought you were different, she said. I thought humans, despite all their wars and their problems, understood the importance of keeping promises, of respecting what's sacred to others. I chose to trust you, James. Out of everyone on this entire planet, I chose you. Zara, I tried to stop this, James said desperately. They were going to do it anyway, with or without me. At least this way I can try to make sure they're gentle, that they don't hurt you. Don't you understand? Her tears kept flowing. The physical pain isn't what matters. It's the breaking of trust. It's knowing that even here, millions of light years from my home, I'm still just a specimen to be studied. Not a person. Not a friend. Just a thing. That's not true. You're my friend. I care about you. Then stop this, she begged. Please, James, don't lift my garment. Don't let them see what's beneath. It will destroy something that can never be repaired. I'm not being dramatic. I'm not exaggerating. This will sever me from everything I am. Please. James looked at Director Chen, at the guards, at the officials watching with impatient expressions. He looked at the career he'd built over 15 years. He looked at the threats that had been made, the implications that if he didn't do this, someone worse would. And then he looked at Zara, at this being who had traveled across the stars and chosen to trust him, who had laughed at rain and cried at music and treated him like he mattered. I'm sorry, he said again, because he was sorry, because he hated himself for what he was about to do. But he was still going to do it. Zara's skin went completely gray, a color he'd never seen. Later, he'd learn it was the color of grief for her people, the color they turned when something precious was lost forever. Time's up, Director Chen announced. Proceed with the examination. The technicians guided Zara to the examination table. She lay down without resistance, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. Her skin stayed that terrible gray color, not shifting, not changing. It was like watching someone die while they were still breathing. Dr. Rivera, Director Chen said, we need you to assist. You've built the rapport with the subject. She'll respond better to you. Subject, not Zara, not a person. Subject. James approached the table on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. One of the technicians handed him a scanner. The other stood ready with instruments, though James didn't let himself look too closely at what they were for. "Zara," James said softly, I need to lift your garment slightly. Just enough for the scanner." She didn't respond, didn't look at him, just kept staring at the ceiling like she'd gone somewhere far away inside herself. "Zara, please, talk to me." "There's nothing to say," she whispered. "You've made your choice. Now make mine for me too. I can't give permission for something that will destroy me, so I'll give nothing at all. Do what you came here to do." James's hand shook as he reached for the edge of her garment. It felt warm to the touch, almost alive. The patterns on it seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "Please," Zara said one last time, so quiet he almost missed it. "Don't lift my skirt." He hesitated. For one brief, infinite moment, James stood at a crossroads. He could still walk away, could still refuse, could still choose her trust over everything else. But he didn't. James lifted the garment. The room filled with a sound, something between a gasp and a scream from everyone present. Beneath the garment wasn't biological anatomy at all. It was a crystal structure, intricate and beautiful, glowing with soft inner light. It looked like solidified starlight, geometric and organic at once, with patterns that seemed to extend into dimensions the human eye couldn't quite process. But even as they watched, the crystal began to change. The moment Earth's atmosphere touched it, hairline cracks appeared across its surface. The glow started to fade, dimming like a sunset and fast forward. The patterns collapsed inward, becoming simpler, less beautiful, less alive. And Zara screamed. It wasn't a scream of physical pain, though James would spend the rest of his life wishing it had been. It was worse. It was the sound of someone having their soul torn out, while they were still conscious enough to feel every moment of it. It was anguish-made sound, loss-given voice. She screamed until her voice broke, until she couldn't scream anymore. And then she just lay there shaking, her skin that terrible gray color, tears streaming down her face in rivers of starlight that pooled on the examination table. "Fascinating," one of the officials murmured, already taking notes. "The crystal structure appears to be some kind of organic quantum computing matrix, possibly used for long-range communication." James couldn't hear the rest. All he could hear was Zara's broken breathing, the small sounds of pain she made when she thought no one was listening. All he could see was what he'd done, what he'd destroyed. The crystal was damaged now permanently. Even a non-expert could see that. Whatever it had been, whatever purpose it served, was compromised beyond repair. And James had done it. He'd lifted the garment. He'd broken his promise. He'd destroyed something sacred because he was too weak to refuse. Director Chen seemed satisfied, already discussing next steps with his officials. The guards relaxed their stances. The technicians carefully documented everything, taking scans and images of the damaged crystal. No one was looking at Zara's face. No one except James. And in her eyes he saw something worse than hatred. He saw nothing. She looked at him like he was a stranger, like he'd never been anything more. The connection they'd built over months, the friendship, the trust, all of it gone in an instant. Burned away the moment he'd made his choice. They let her leave eventually, escorted back to her quarters. She walked like she was carrying a weight too heavy to bear, her skin still that awful gray. She didn't look back at James. Not once. He stood in the medical bay long after everyone else had left, staring at the examination table, at the small droplets of her tears that hadn't yet evaporated. Starlight tears for a trust that would never shine again. James had always thought of himself as a good person, someone who valued ethics and morality, someone who stood up for what was right. That day he learned something terrible about himself. He learned that when it really mattered, when everything was on the line, he chose self-preservation over principle. He chose his career over another. The silence was the worst part. Not the absence of sound, but the quality of it. Heavy, suffocating. The kind of silence that fills the space where something precious used to be. 3 days passed since the examination. 3 days since James had broken his promise and shattered something irreplaceable. 3 days since he'd last seen Zara. Though he'd tried to visit her quarters 16 times, she wouldn't see him, wouldn't respond to his messages, wouldn't acknowledge his existence at all. James stopped sleeping. Food tasted like ash. He'd stand in the shower until the water ran cold, trying to wash away the memory of that moment, of lifting her garment, of watching the crystal crack and dim. It never worked. The memory was burned into his mind, playing on repeat every time he closed his eyes. On the fourth day, Director Chen called him back to his office. James went, though he felt like a ghost walking through the facility. People avoided his eyes in the hallways. They'd heard what happened. Some thought he was a hero for advancing human knowledge. Most thought he was something much worse. Dr. Rivera, Director Chen greeted him with false warmth. Sit down. We need to discuss your future with the project. James sat, though he didn't care about his future anymore. What was a career compared to what he'd done? I'll be direct, Director Chen continued. You've been removed from active work with the alien. Your emotional attachment has become problematic. However, your insights have been valuable. We have questions about what we observed. Her name is Zara, James said flatly. Yes, Zara. Director Chen pulled out a tablet showing images of the damaged crystal. We need to understand what this structure was, what it did. The subject has refused to speak to anyone since the examination. We thought perhaps you could convince her to cooperate. You want me to hurt her again? James's laugh was bitter, empty. You want me to use whatever scraps of trust might possibly remain to extract more information from her? We want you to do your job, Director Chen said coldly. Whatever that structure was, it was clearly important. Possibly a communication device. Possibly a weapon. We need to know. It wasn't a weapon. James stood up, his hands clenched. It was her connection to her people. Her entire species is linked through those crystals. They share thoughts, emotions, experiences across light years of space. It's how they've built their civilization, how they understand each other, how they exist. And we just severed her from all of it. She's alone now in a way we can't even comprehend. Director Chen's expression didn't change. And how do you know this? Because I actually listened to her. James's voice rose despite himself. Because I treated her like a person instead of a specimen, she told me. Not in words, maybe, but in everything she shared about her world. They're not individuals like us. They're parts of a whole, and we just amputated her from that whole. Fascinating, Director Chen murmured, making notes. A hive mind species. That explains much. It also raises significant security concerns. Security concerns? James felt something crack inside him. She trusted us. She came here in peace, vulnerable and alone, and we repaid that by destroying the very thing that made her who she is. And you're worried about security? I'm worried about a species with quantum communication across space that could coordinate an invasion before we even knew it was happening, Director Chen snapped. I'm worried about Earth's survival, Dr. Rivera. Your guilt, however justified, is not my priority. Then what is? Results, information, understanding our potential enemy before they become an actual one. Director Chen leaned forward. Now will you help us, or do I need to find someone else who will? James walked out without answering. Let them find someone else. Let them try. Zara wouldn't talk to them. She wouldn't talk to anyone. He'd made sure of that when he broke her trust so completely that even her ability to trust might be gone forever. He found himself walking to her quarters anyway. The guards stationed outside knew him, though they looked uncomfortable when he approached. She still won't see anyone, Dr. Rivera, one guard said, not unkindly. Hasn't left her room since the incident. Hasn't eaten either, as far as we can tell. Let me try, James said quietly. Please. The guard exchanged glances with his partner, then shrugged. Your funeral, Doc. But don't expect miracles. James stood at her door for a full minute before knocking. No response. He knocked again. Zara, it's James. I know you don't want to see me. I know you probably hate me, and you have every right to. But please at least let me know you're okay. You don't have to talk to me. Just make a sound. Let me know you're still alive in there. Silence. Then so faint he almost missed it, a voice. Go away. Relief flooded through him. She was alive. She was conscious. It wasn't much, but it was something. I can't, he said through the door. I can't just walk away and pretend I didn't destroy your life. I need you to know how sorry I am. I need you to understand that I hate myself for what I did more than you could ever hate me. You think this is about hate? Her voice was closer now, just on the other side of the door. Still that terrible flatness to it, like all emotion had been burned away. I don't hate you, James. I don't feel anything at all anymore. Do you know what that's like? To exist in absolute silence? To know that billions of voices that used to fill every moment of your existence are gone forever, and all that's left is this tiny, isolated consciousness that doesn't even know how to be alone. James pressed his forehead against the door. Tell me how to fix it. There has to be a way. There isn't. The crystal is damaged beyond repair. Even if we had the technology of my people, which we don't, the exposure to your atmosphere caused molecular changes that can't be reversed. Her voice cracked slightly. I'm severed, James, permanently. I'll never hear my family again. Never share thoughts with my friends. Never be part of the collective consciousness that's been my entire identity since birth. You didn't just hurt me, you erased who I was. Then let me help you become someone new, James said desperately. Please, Zara, don't give up. Don't let what I did define the rest of your existence. Silence again. Then so quietly he had to strain to hear, Why should I trust you? It was a fair question. The fairest question anyone had ever asked him. And he had no good answer. You shouldn't, he admitted. I broke your trust in the worst possible way. I chose fear over friendship. I chose to follow orders instead of standing up for what was right. You should never trust me again. Then why are you here? Because I can't leave things like this. Because I need you to know that what happened was my failure, not yours. You did nothing wrong by trusting me. I'm the one who failed to be worthy of that trust. More silence. James waited, his heart pounding. Finally, the door opened a crack. Zara stood there and James barely recognized her. She'd always been vibrant, her skin shifting through beautiful colors. Now she was just gray, solid, unchanging gray. Her eyes looked hollow, distant. I'll make you a deal, she said softly. I'll try to survive this. I'll try to find some way to exist in this awful silence, but I need something from you in return. Anything, James said immediately. Stop apologizing. Stop trying to make yourself feel better about what you did. If you truly feel guilty, then use that guilt to do something better. Make sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else. Make sure the next alien who comes to your world in peace doesn't end up broken like me. Her gray eyes met his. Can you do that? James nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Good, now go away. I need to figure out how to be a person instead of a piece of a whole, and I need to do that alone. She closed the door quietly. James stood there for a long moment, her words echoing in his mind. Then he walked away, his path finally clear. He couldn't fix what he'd broken, but he could make sure it never happened again. He just had to figure out how. 2 months passed like walking through thick fog. James showed up to work because not showing up meant they'd assign someone worse to watch over Zara. He sat through meetings where officials discussed her like she was a broken machine instead of a traumatized being. He filed reports that made his stomach turn. And every night he went home and researched. He started with human technology, quantum communication, neural networks, crystalline computing structures. He reached out to scientists across the globe, carefully avoiding mentioning why he needed the information. Most laughed at his questions. Quantum entanglement on a biological level? Impossible. Crystal structures that could transmit consciousness across light years? Pure fantasy. But James kept looking. Because impossible or not, Zara's people had done it, which meant it could be done. Zara, meanwhile, slowly started to emerge from her quarters. Not by choice, James learned. Director Chen had made it clear she either participated in their research or she'd be confined as a potential security threat. So she came to the lab, sat for their endless tests, answered their questions in that flat, emotionless voice that made James want to break things. She'd changed in ways that went beyond the permanent gray of her skin. She moved differently, hesitant and uncertain, like she had to think about every step. Her people had probably shared even basic motor functions through their connection. Thousands of minds helping with every movement. Now she had to do it all alone. One day, 3 months after the incident, James found her in the facility library. She sat alone at a table covered in books. Human books about philosophy, psychology, neuroscience. Trying to understand what it meant to be an individual, probably. The sight of her there, isolated and struggling, made something twist painfully in his chest. May I sit? He asked quietly. She looked up, those hollow gray eyes meeting his briefly before returning to her book. It's a free space. James sat across from her, unsure how to start. They hadn't really talked since that day at her door. Just passing interactions in the labs, professional and cold. I've been researching, he said finally, ways to repair crystalline structures, quantum communication protocols. I've been talking to scientists who specialize in exotic materials. Why? Zara didn't look up from her book. Because I'm trying to fix what I broke. I told you it can't be fixed. Maybe not completely, James admitted. But there might be a way to create a partial connection. Something that could let you hear your people again, even if it's not the same as before. That got her attention. She closed the book slowly, her gray eyes focusing on him with the first hint of emotion he'd seen in months. Not hope exactly. More like the faint echo of what hope used to feel like. "Explain," she said. James pulled out his tablet, showing her diagrams he'd been working on. "Your crystal worked through quantum entanglement, right? Each member of your species has their own crystal, but they're all entangled with each other at a subatomic level. That's how you share consciousness across space." Simplified but essentially correct, Zara confirmed. "The damage to your crystal broke those entanglements. But what if we could create new ones? Artificial entanglements using a hybrid device. Part human quantum computing, part reconstructed crystal based on scans we took before the exposure." "It wouldn't be the same," Zara said quietly. "The original connections formed when I was born. They've had my entire lifetime to develop, to become nuanced and complex. An artificial connection would be crude by comparison." "Crude is better than nothing," James said. "Isn't it?" For the first time since the incident, something flickered across her gray skin. Just for a moment, a faint blue shimmer. Then it was gone, but James had seen it. The first color he'd witnessed in 3 months. "It's theoretically possible," Zara said slowly, her voice cautious. "But it would require technology your people don't have, and materials that don't exist on Earth." "Then teach me," James said intensely. "Help me understand how your technology works. I'll find a way to build something similar here. I'll spend every waking moment on it if I have to." "Why?" Zara asked again, but this time it sounded different. Not accusatory, but genuinely curious. "Why does this matter so much to you? Your guilt? Your conscience?" "Both," James admitted. "But also because it's the right thing to do. And because I need to prove to myself that I'm better than the person who broke his promise. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I never will be. But I have to try." Zara was quiet for a long time, studying his face like she was trying to read something written there. Finally she spoke. "If we do this, we do it my way. No more officials. No more Director Chen looking over our shoulders. No more treating me like a specimen. Just you and me working together. Can you make— Please, don't lift my skirt," the alien girl begged, but the human did, and it broke him.